Thank you for joining us at the Gnomon School of Visual Effects, Games and Animation for the Art of Storytelling for Video Games. We're excited to have such an amazing panel of speakers here today from Infinity Ward, Naughty Dog, and Monolith. Josh has even flown all the way from Washington, so thank you so much for going to such great efforts, guys. I think we should have a huge round of applause for today's guests for taking time out on a Saturday to be here. I also must give a huge thanks to Rogelio Olguin, who has basically concepted today's event and basically made it happen. So huge kudos, Rogelio. We always love it when artists reach out with awesome ideas like this. So if there's any more artists in the audience that want to get in touch, please feel free. Awesome. So we'll kick off today's event with Josh Lynch, a senior texture artist at Monolith, and environment artist Brian Recktenwald from Naughty Dog. They'll both be offering a close-up look at their approaches to texturing and shading for environments. So starting up will be Josh first. Brian actually recently just got back from Gnomon Live in Australia, so he's been giving presentations in Melbourne and Sydney as part of a special event which was curated by our Gnomon founder, Alex Alvarez. So we're working him pretty hard this month, I think. He'll be glad to have a break after this. I recommend, if you didn't know anything about Gnomon Live, check out gnomonlive.com.au. There's lots of photos that have just gone up there from that event that happened. Okay, so we'll take a break at 1:30. We'll do a little swap over of our workstations up here, give you a chance to stretch your legs. We do have a lounge, which has a vending machine in it, and we always have like waters and sodas for you guys, so you can feel free to step outside. There's plenty of chairs, so you'll be fine getting a seat coming back in. We'll regroup again here at 2. And we'll have environment modeling and texture artist Rogelio Olguin from Naughty Dog, and Brian Horton, art director at Infinity Ward, who'll be closing today's event with a high-level view of environmental storytelling. We should definitely have time for a Q&A session with all 4 speakers. So we'll have them all come up to the stage around 3:30 or so. So if you have questions that we can't get to throughout everyone's allotted times, we should have a chance to answer some more at the end. If you're in the stage to ask questions, please raise your hand and we'll bring the mic to you. If you're watching on live stream, please pitch your questions on Twitter using #Gnomon, and we'll do our best to read some of those out. If you are watching on live stream, you're welcome to submit comments on the live stream live chat and on Facebook comments, but we'll be looking out for questions on Twitter. So please do use the hashtag if you want them to be read out. And as always, if anyone's interested in touring the campus after the event, please let me know, and we will show you around. Oh, and Rogelio has very kindly, you've all been given a raffle ticket. He's very kindly bought 2 books here, which we'll be raffling off at the end, so make sure you stick around to the very end. I'm going to stop talking and then hand over to Josh, and we'll get started. So let's have another round of applause. Thank you.
All right, how's everybody doing? Can you hear me okay? All right, cool. Well, I want to say thanks for taking the time out of your day to join us in person and online. So we're going to be talking about environment storytelling for games, and specifically how textures contribute to storytelling of game environments. And so as I was introduced, my name is Josh Lynch, and I'm a senior texture artist. And I wanted to do a brief introduction for you guys, a little biography about me. I was born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona, and graduated from the University of Advancing Technology. I got my first gig at 2XL Games in 2009, and shortly after that I married my beautiful wife Erin in 2010. And in addition to working my day job, I try to do tutorials and mentorships through my Gumroad. So if you're ever interested in that, just hit me up. And some of the professional projects I've contributed to, currently working on Shadow of War, previously Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, which is a bulk of my talk is going to cover that, Black Ops 3, Advanced Warfare, and Defiance. So textures and storytelling, right? So to me, this is my big passion. I really get into the texture aspect of environment art. And so through the coming examples, I want to show you guys how creating well-developed textures can bring character and interest to a world and contribute to compelling storytelling in environment art. And I wanted to start off the talk by discussing leveraging life experiences. So everybody here has personal experiences as far as what they've seen in life. You have an idea of associations with the world around you, right? Everybody's familiar with what brick feels like, what painted metal feels like, cloth, raw metal, things like that. So with that in mind, I feel like it's of the utmost importance to create textures based on real life. When you create textures based on real life, it is important to reference real life examples. You try to understand as much as you can the surface response of that material type. So if you make something up, it just will feel wrong and it won't be pleasing to the player. They may not know why, but they'll feel it, and so you want to try to avoid that. And wrapping up with that, if you create from real life, you're going to have a grounded experience for the player. I think that's the most critical thing you can do is just try to really make it a good experience for the player. So for a texture's core elements, there's DNA, which is, what are the core properties of the surface type? Is it metal? Is it brick? Is it plastic? So as I mentioned in the previous slide, you want to understand that surface type and try to recreate it to the best of your ability. And then with age, how old do you want the surface to look in the environment? Is it something that's brand new? Is it slightly used? Do we want to have it feel historic? And then you want to try to understand what is the natural process as a surface ages, and then how much of a human element do you want to have impacting the aging of this texture? Is it something where we want to have the texture feeling like there's just a lot of rain falling all the time, or do we want to feel like, hey man, somebody came through on these bricks with a hammer, right? So I think it's important to make those decisions early on. And then it's crucial to understand the core properties of the surface and how they're going to translate to PBR and how a light will play off of a surface. So all of these elements are going to add up to making strong textures that will have a lot to contribute to an environment once they're placed. All right, so reference. I try to take a lot of reference photos. Oftentimes, if I'm walking with a group, they'll be talking to me, and I stop, and I'm over there like on my knees trying to get the glancing angle of something. So that's me, but reference is super important to understand. So let's look at some examples of reference and what it can show us about storytelling. So this is an abandoned space here, right? We can see that pretty clearly, but what makes it feel abandoned? You see, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, yeah, a little bit. You have surfaces that are stripped down, like the plaster's breaking off and showing the brick here. There's debris all over the ground. And I think the most important thing for me is you can see nature starting to take back over here with the moss coming through. And here's an additional reference of an abandoned space. So you have snowdrifts immediately, like you can see it, it's like its own character in here. And in addition to that, you have, again, plaster breaking off to reveal raw brick. You have concrete over here. I'm assuming this is some painted metal. It could be wallpaper, but you also have some frost collecting, and all of these things add up to a feeling of, what this space was and where it is now and how nature is coming through and taking back over. All right. So as far as some of the other things, like when you're looking at reference, you can see right away what kind of geography or location it is. Like on the left here, we have desert, and on the right, we have a Greenland area, and then you have seasons, right? So on the left, seasons can dramatically alter an environment, right? So in the spring or summertime, you see a lot of dead leaves on the ground. You can see the pine needles maybe. There's a lot of lived-in elements that are collected. But then once winter comes, everything's covered in grass, and you no longer see any of that, right? And then you have old and new. So on the left here, older buildings are they're created with more readily available material types, such as stone, brick, and plaster. And the road in this particular case doesn't have any kind of stone, it's just mostly dirt. But then with a newer building, you're going to have features of concrete, metal paneling, wood, and glass. And then age and history, right? I kind of mentioned that a little bit ago. I love this shot because you can see that on the right, everything's pretty new. And then on the upper left, up here, it looks like they're slightly old, but on the bottom left, they're very old, right? And everything in here looks to be like of a natural process, right? Nothing has come in and shattered these bricks. All right, so tying textures to the environment and the lived-in details. So this is something that I really try to focus on when I'm making terrain textures. If we look at the left image here, this is mostly a pristine beach. There's some small rocks and some shells and like footprints, but on the right, there's the human element of plastic, right? And you can just tell from this shot, maybe on the left it could be from an island, but on the right it's from a populated area with some people that don't really care about how the beach looks. But I think those are big distinctions, and as soon as you add in those small details, like they're just pieces of straw or garbage, but once you add them in, it can add a lot of variety and interest to the texture. So this is another reference example here. You can see that there's some larger footprints and smaller footprints here. There's some elements of plant life, right? Like you can see that there's twigs. But I think the coolest thing about this reference, and this is from the Salton Sea, but there's some dead fish in here, right? So how cool would that be to have that kind of embedded into the dirt? You get a really unique feeling from that. And you know that this was maybe a lake and it's dried up now. All right, so textures and lighting. And I feel like this is really important for making a texture feel alive. And they go hand in hand, right? You can't have one without the other. So making a texture feel alive. So the first thing that I feel that makes a texture feel alive is bending the light. So every surface in the world is not flat. Like it's perceptually flat, but you want to have a little bit of movement in the surface. Like even this concrete floor here is not perfectly flat. So you want to try to break the stiffness and rigid feeling of CG art. And so you have like a slight undulation or bend to tiles or stones, I think can go a long way. And then the tail of the light. So what I mean by that is if you have a hot spot on a light and as that fades off, you want to have a lot of interest to make the texture feel alive. Like if you have something that is smudged, you're going to see the fingerprints as the light fades off. And then the fingernail test. So I think about this a lot. If I hold something in my hand like a piece of wood or brick and I scrape it, am I going to feel resistance, or is it like a bathroom tile where I'm going to feel nothing and it's going to look very smooth? Or feel very smooth, sorry. So some examples of this this is some rough concrete I took of in Santa Monica sometime. So on the left here, you can see as the light's hitting the surface, you have a really big impact from the light. You can see that the rocks are popping off and that the surface, or the fingernail test, as I like to call it, of the surface here is very rough. So if you were going to scrape it, you can feel that it would be very rough. And then on the right here, this is the same surface without light at a glancing angle. So you can see how the impact of the light plays off the surface there. All right, so this is kind of the biggest thing to me in terms of that surface movement. So we have large tiles mixed in with small tiles, right? And as soon as you have the light coming across the surface, you can really see that it kind of breaks on the smaller tiles. You can see that they're tilted, and that makes it feel more lived in and natural. And the same thing here with the bricks on the right. And then this is a surface from Infinite Warfare, and this is a good example. So as you can see the light cascading down the surface, it bends from tile to tile, and over here on the left you can see it fracturing. And then there's also the surface tooth, which is pretty smooth, except there's some small pocks, and then you're going to have the tail of the light, right? And it's kind of breaking off as it fades away. It's fracturing, and that's coming from the gloss mat. All right, so some personal projects that I've done that I feel like kind of tie into these previous reference examples. So this is a brick wall from up in Woodland Hills where I used to live at a restaurant, and I really liked it. I thought it was really cool, and I just wanted to make it. So the reason I liked it was the sloppy mortar kind of coming out. I thought, man, that's really cool, and I wanted to try to pull that off. I also liked the angled bricks and the slight damage that shows some age and wear, but it's not destroyed. So I feel like it had a good lived-in feeling of like, hey, these are kind of older, but they haven't been through a lot yet. And there's some subtle surface stains and paint marks. So this reference shot is kind of in an ambient light. It's pretty uniformly lit. And then this is from a different area, but you can see that with the bricks aren't just devoid of light response, right? So I think that's something that's commonly overlooked. You want to have a little bit of play there, and you can also see the surface tooth here. And then this is from a different area, but the thing that I really liked here was the dust that was kind of capturing or settling on top of the bricks. So it had a really good lived-in feeling for me. I knew that these were older. And so here's the sunlight render of that, and then the clay render. Here's another shot of it with more dramatic evening lighting. So you can see that the stark contrast here between the daylight hitting it kind of flattens everything out, but with dramatic lighting where it's like the sun or the light source isn't as strong, you can see the bend of the bricks kind of catching the light, and it really makes it feel more organic and less stiff. So there's a clay render, but you can see the light color flowing across the surface there. And I wanted to do a small breakdown for you guys to show you how important all of these aspects of the shader setup are. So we have the height and the normal, right? And this feels pretty good, but it doesn't feel weighted. It doesn't feel natural, right? So as soon as we add the AO and the gloss, you can see that it feels really lived in, and it feels really weighted, and you can feel the crevices of the dirt really popping, or the brick popping through. And then this is the albedo pass. So everything's online here. All right, so sand reference here. So I made some sand recently. I wanted to capture, footprints, small rocks, and debris. And so here's a beautiful daytime kind of render shot of that. So all of the elements are in there. You have small pieces of trash, small pieces of rock, footprints, and kind of natural undulation to the surface. And then here's a dusk render of the same thing. All right, so professional projects. We're going to discuss Call of Duty Infinite Warfare and Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about are material considerations in Call of Duty. So Call of Duty is a realistic game, right? And you want to have all of your materials be based off of real-life examples or inspired by real-life examples with accurate material properties. The games are fast-paced, right? So there's a lot of running around and shooting. So it's not like a third-person story game where you're going to have a lot of time to stop and have reveal moments and be like, oh, that looks really pretty up there. A lot of times you're just flying through. And so for me, what that means is you want your materials to have a lot of eye rest, right? You don't want them to be a distraction to the player. You want them to act as a backdrop and a supportive element of the environment, and that will lead to a beautiful experience for the player because they're able to focus on who they need to shoot and just move their way through and not be distracted by a bunch of noise on the surfaces. And then there's clean reads, right? So, you want to have materials be easily identifiable at a glance because you are running by. You don't need it to be super detailed cobblestone maybe, but you want it to just be that's cobblestone, and it makes me feel like I'm in the world, and then you move on. All right, so, we're going to talk a little bit about Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, and the first map I want to do a small breakdown on is the Geneva map. So for this map, we made a lot of city textures, and we wanted to create a lot of drama through the materials. There's going to be a lot of cobblestone and asphalt. We want to have good puddles, and we're going to talk a little bit about blends. So selling the drama, right? The world that we were making was there's a lot of action going on, but we wanted it to be dramatic visually. We wanted beautiful light and a lot of colors coming through. So, we made a couple of cobblestone and asphalt texture blends, and we worked hard to get puddle shaders online, and then, I worked with the lighting team, tried to work closely with them on making sure that what I was supplying made everything feel like a rich and vibrant world with their beautiful lighting pass. All right, so here's a shot from one of the areas, and as you can see, there's cobblestone, there's debris, there's water, but mostly the lighting is really cool, and everything's easy to look into, so there's a lot of eye rest there, right? Nothing's very distracting. You can really look into the photo. So here's a reference that kind of shows what we were trying to go for. So as you can see here, there's a lot of really cool evening lighting. Like everything is yellow, there's blue, there's purple, and because of the wet ground, all of that light is spilling onto the terrain, and it just really makes everything pop up. It's awesome. So here's another shot of a similar area, but it's daytime. There's no water. It's just not as impactful visually. It's very real and it's valid, but it's not as vibrant as this, right? So we wanted to go for this type of look. And then here's some reference that I took outside of the studio. So it doesn't rain often in LA, so when it did, I was like, oh man, I gotta get outside and take some photos. So it really helped me actually, because one thing I want to say is like it's nice to find photos online, and that's cool, but there's nothing like going out and having that visual like aid of just looking at it in real life. You can really get in there and see how does it look if I'm at this angle or this angle. It just helps a lot, right? So in addition to that, you have these puddles are kind of taking over the asphalt, and you can see the environment behind them, and it's just really beautiful. So we wanted to try to make sure that we got that look in there. All right, so let's do a small breakdown of the blends in the puddle tech and some of the materials. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was we had this reference shot for the asphalt. And again, this was near the studio because I really wanted to look at something that I could go out and study. I didn't want to just take a photo online and be like, yeah, that's good. I really wanted to understand it. So what I noticed was, you have a really cool rough asphalt here, and then you have a smooth asphalt, right? And there's a lot going on even just in this photo. So let me go to the next shot here, and then I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth when I'm talking about it. So if we look, the rough asphalt is very pebbly, right? There's a lot of exposed rock, but mostly there's a lot of contrast that way, but the raw asphalt is a slightly warmer tone, and the smooth asphalt is cooler, right? So what I wanted to do was capture that contrast in the albedo, but I also wanted to bring in elements of when the smooth asphalt is blending through to the rough, the first thing that starts to come through is the little pebbles, right? So you can see that's happening in the reference photo here. So I wanted to try to capture that. And then the gloss on the rocks is really popping off, so it's really cool, like when the blend is working and the lighting's hitting it, right? It really makes it jump off. All right, so here's some isolated renders. So this is fairly simple right on its own. It's not really exciting, like it's just a smooth asphalt. But once you combine it with the blend, then it feels really good, right? So you have the smooth asphalt with the rough, and they add up to make a really cool blend material that adds a lot of interest to the storytelling. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is puddles and kind of how they work and why we set up our puddle tech the way we did. So if you look at this cobblestone reference here, you can see the stones, but as it dips behind the water, they feel like they're behind the surface, right? The color behind the water is getting darkened, and also the normal map and the gloss take over on the puddle. So you have a really stark material contrast and break there, and then it's also reflecting the environment around it. So this is an early shot of the puddle tech. So at this point, the shader was not online, but I felt like it was important to kind of show you this photo because I think this isn't something that's talked about a lot in terms of game development. This is early on, right? So this is just me getting the stuff in game, and then everybody is placing it around, and then as soon as that shader came online, it's banging, right? So that's kind of like how I like to work. I don't want to wait for everything to be perfect before I put it in. I want to try to get it in there, and then that way when something updates, it's good. So at this point, the shader was just a basic spec gloss shader. We didn't have the proper support yet from TechArt, so we just had the blended fade off here, which was making the asphalt surface that felt rough kind of get wet, and then it was going to a super smooth and glossy surface, which was just a flat water here. So at this point, you're seeing behind the water, and it's not darkening anything, right? And so this is a shot with the puddle tech online. And this is an overhead view. But what I really liked about, I wanted to speak about it was, over here you just have like a flat color, right? Or it's relatively simple in terms of like, hey, there's some color blocks happening here, but as soon as you come over here to where the puddle shader is online, it's darkened. So even from that angle, it feels real, like you know that that's water there, because water darkens everything, right? So and then, at this glancing angle, you can see that the puddle tech is there, it's darkening the surface, you get the tide highlight and the material break. All right, so the next part I want to talk about is just regular cobblestone reference. So the biggest thing to me when I'm looking at references, I'm trying to bring over mostly the core essence of what the surface is, right, the DNA, but I want to try to find little things to make it look cool. So in this reference here, the first thing I noticed was a lot of the stones are just tilting, right? And then you have small surface undulation within those stones, then you have even smaller pock marks and surface tooth, and then you have lived-in debris such as pebbles and gum. So I felt like those were really cool elements to bring over and to tie it all in. So I don't know if you guys can see it very well, but in here, we see all those elements. All the surfaces are tilting. You have the small pock marks, the small pebbles, and the gum, making it feel lived in. So here's a couple of shots of it working. Everything's online here, right? You got the cobblestone, you got the water shader, you got the lighting coming in, and it's really cool. You can see that the cobblestone's here, and it's kind of looks like it's dipping behind the water puddles. And then here's another shot of the same thing, but with asphalt. So we have the rough asphalt blend with some cracks, and then it looks like it's, again, going behind the water. Cool. So then the next map I want to talk about was the Retribution interior. And this wasn't as kind of dramatic as the Geneva map, but it still had a lot of opportunity for good storytelling. And I feel like when I was making these textures for this map, because we didn't have a lot of opportunity to do like, hey, we have some stones with some dirt blending, like how are we going to get these to feel aged and have a personality? So the first thing that I noticed was, hey, so everything that's constructed feels really sound, but I felt like we could get some really cool surface wear in there, right, to make it feel lived in and heavily trafficked. And the other thing I want to mention is, for this portion, we had a heavy influence from military and NASA elements. And even more importantly, we didn't want to do any typical kind of sci-fi tropes, right? We didn't want to have all these beveled edges, and we wanted things to feel like they were in space and slightly in the future, but we didn't want to just go down that road. And then I'm going to do a simple breakdown of the materials after we discuss those elements. So this is a concept here by Victor Johnson. And the thing that I really loved about this when I saw it for the first time was there was a big difference between the hard surface and the soft surface materials, right? You have like the metal paneling on the walls and the floors, and then you have the cloth. And for this map, there was a big effort of giving the environment indications of layering and depth. So we had that via the geo, but I wanted to try to bring that over via the materials as well. So we'll look at that a little bit later. All right, so here's another reference. So I really like this shot. It's cool because for the most part, the ground has a lot of eye rest, right? And it's very similar to the concept by Victor. And you note that the floor looks to have panels that can be removed, and there's simple colors which create a lot of eye rest, and then the additional noise comes through the gloss and roughness as the light interacts with the surface. So this shot here, it has nothing to do with ships, but I liked it because it kind of shows everything I'm talking about. It's simple to look into, and then as soon as the light hits it, you see the material response. So I felt like that was important to include that. So here's a lot of reference that we looked at as far as the space stuff. So we have a lot of cloth, and then we have this kind of black cloth here, we have white cloth, we have a variety of padding, we have netting here. So all of these reference images were really influential in the materials that were made for the ship interior. and then we made some foil. So I love this shot because the guy's like kind of holding it. But I love the color pop, right? And the material separation, so you have like this foil and then you have raw metals. And so then here's a shot of the interior with all these kind of elements coming together. So, if you look, there's not, like I said, there's not a lot of layering going on, but when the light plays off the surface, you get a lot of interest, that tail of the light making things feel lived in and used. So here's another shot showing a different angle, but you can really see in the ground here that there's a lot of interest in the roughness, and there's some chip paint going on. And then we have back here some cloth wall that was made. All right, so here's a more detailed shot of this ground paneling. So all of the detail for this really came from the gloss. So I really wanted it to feel simple when the light wasn't on it, so it's easy to look into, and then as soon as you get that glancing angle, it like pops off the screen. So if you look at the gloss here, there's a lot of interest put into it. There's a lot of smudges and scratches, and then the albedo is relatively simple. And so the same thing here with this cloth padded wall. And one thing I want to mention here too is we wanted to give everything a feeling of layering, like you could access it. So there's panels and there's a feeling that on the side here, these big panels can be lifted up if you unscrew that notch and kind of pull a lever maybe, or there's some little access panels here. And the same thing with this cloth. So if we jump back a few slides and look at this guy, there's really not a lot kind of going on, but what I did notice about it was if you look at it, there's panels. Even though it's like a cloth padded wall, there's places where it connects, and there's a feeling that if I pull that back, I can get to something. So I really wanted to try to bring that over in through here. So I just have some small fasteners here, and there's a feeling of like layering. So there's a big strip here that feels like, well, that's the whole thing that's really holding it together, and those are my metal fasteners. And then there's these connections here, which are like maybe where it's sewn together. So that's kind of like how I thought about if I wanted to peel that back, what I would do to the texture to make it feel that way. And then this is just a tiling cloth padded wall, but it serves its purpose, right? And I wanted to make it feel like not so generic, so I kind of gave these little pocks a feeling like of strength and resistance, so if it was scratched or a knife went over it, it wouldn't easily rip open. There was something there that kind of made it feel like you had to do more to break it up. And then here's the foil. So, I mean, it just is foil. So, yeah. I just really love it.
Shiny.
Yeah, it's shiny. So yeah, here's Advanced Warfare. And this was a Chop Shop DLC map for one of the map packs. And for this breakdown, I really wanted to show some focus on how I used set dressing and blends to really make the environment feel alive. So we have the topics of the abandoned interior, and we're going to leverage blends. All right, so here's some reference, right? So the first thing that I notice about this reference is you have your main surface, which is these tiles, then you have some dirt on top of it, and then you have larger debris kind of scattered to the edge. So all of those are really big storytelling elements to me that I wanted to bring over. And the one thing that I also noticed was it almost seemed like because that's clean there and that water puddle's there and next to the door, it makes me, even though this is a reference photo, I feel like I want to move through that space and try to get to the other side. So I wanted to try to capture that feeling in the little interior space that I was making and hopefully pull the player through, give them the sensation to do that. And so water adding the drama, right? Like I feel like it's like a Hype Williams kind of music video. Like as soon as you add water, it's awesome. So I always try to add a little bit of water puddles. Yeah, and then we have some staining up here on the surface, even though it's concrete. And just generally everything feels old. There's some like graffiti and peeling paint and all that. So here's a shot kind of the space, right? The first thing that you see is the ground, the walls, and then the ceiling. So as far as the ground goes, it was like a pretty simple painted metal surface, but it had a lot of interest in the gloss, and then you notice that all the debris whether it was in the texture blend or the meshes, they're all kept to the side. And because this is a multiplayer space, I worked with the designer to try to make sure that there was like enough room for them to feel like the art wasn't interfering with the gameplay, but I could tell a story to pull the player through. And then you also notice that on the walls there's some subtle grunge, there's some graffiti, and some scuff marks, revealing the raw paint behind it. And then up here you have panels popped off, and then you have some water stains, right? And then you have hanging elements, and it's giving a sensation that something is coming through. And so from this angle, you get a better idea, like there's a pipe here, and then there's some water droplets. I tried to get a better shot where the effect is happening and it's kind of coming off the ground, but I could never get it to work. So, but
it works pretty well.
When you're playing, you get all these feelings of this is what's happening in this space. So there's larger debris panels here that have broken off and they're all kind of tucked over there. There's some boxes and some computer parts and there's some cups. So everything here is feeling like, hey, there was something here at one time, and then everybody kind of left. And they stopped caring about the place, and then it just kind of went down this path. But again, the debris here, water puddles, adding the drama. So for my closing thoughts, we've looked at a variety of examples with how textures can impact storytelling. From having micro stories occurring within the texture itself, and how those textures work to contribute to storytelling on a much larger scale within an environment. We saw how critical it is to leverage a player's life experiences to create believable textures and environments, and understand what makes up the core elements of a texture, using reference as inspiration, the relationship between textures and lighting, and using textures to really tie an environment together. So that's it. Thanks for your time. Start here? Yep.
Josh, that was awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, very cool. It's amazing how much a story can be told in just simple material, textures, and how it goes in macro and micro detail. So I'm going to load up a Keynote here. So, hey everybody, my name is Brian Recktenwald. I'm an environment artist at Naughty Dog. I've been doing environment art for 11 years. Currently at Naughty Dog, I'm doing modeling and scene assembly. But in my past, I've done a little bit of everything. So just to start off with, I'm going to show my reel here. But before I do, I want to mention it's teamwork. There's like hundreds of engineers, designers, audio, administration, you name it. So this is a big teamwork what I'm going to show here. A little crunchy there, little blocks were a little crunch, but yeah, a lot of people had a hand on everything I just showed there. And just to go over the games that I've worked on, Indiana Jones, The Staff of Kings, The Force Unleashed 1, The Force Unleashed DLC, The Force Unleashed 2, the Star Wars 1313 project, and Uncharted 4. And currently working with Rogelio on the Uncharted Lost Legacy. So we're crunching right now on that. Actually, there's probably a lot of people at work right now. So, and then just to go a little about my history, I'm a big Disney fan. My parents programmed me at it's an adorable picture, man. What changed? Something happened here, but my parents, they programmed me at a very young age. We would go, all our trips were basically to Disney World. And that's actually a big part of what I'm going to be talking about, is that theme park influence and how it relates to environment art. And growing up, my babysitter got me into Star Wars. He gave me all his old action figures. And I still have them in a display case at home. I keep them there. And my first 3D model, the Star Destroyer, that's ship it, it's done. That was back in, I think, 1997. And so, yeah, what I'm going to talk about first is the Disney approach to environmental storytelling. And what Disney does really well in their movies and in their theme parks is total and complete immersion. And I'm just going to start off with this quote here by Walt Disney. And I think story is paramount for the films and for the parks. And even when you first enter into the Magic Kingdom or Disneyland, you're transported into a world that you're removed from completely. It's even the entrances and the storefronts are named after Imagineers. It's almost like an opening credit for a game or a movie. And these, I think, is just a really, really great way of pulling you out of reality and into the park, which is what we try to do as environment artists for games. And all these photos I took myself. I'm a big nerd about photography. And like Josh mentioned, I can't stop taking photos, even in the parks. And I'm sure the people around me weren't too happy about that. But here's the Pirates of the Caribbean. It's one of the best dark rides. For those unfamiliar with dark rides, they're basically a slow-moving journey through a bunch of sets. And kind of like games where you have to take in all these little elements, you have nothing but the environment to look at and to absorb in these dark rides. I love exciting rides, I love the roller coasters, but these, in my opinion, are all about storytelling. These slow and calm moments allow you to take in all these little details. And even in this one, there are hundreds of little mini stories. If you go and research, you see tons of little details everywhere that just add to the ride as a whole. And even in the more stylized rides, like this great movie ride in Hollywood Studios, my favorite ride ever, they apply these stylized techniques that are used in film and games to give separation and depth. And I think this is a very successful example, so it doesn't always have to be realistic. And again, using matte paintings, the grunge and wear, the lighting, it just gives you a complete immersion that you're in this city. And we try to do that all the time when we make games. And even interactive animated elements like the steam shoots out and it kind of grabs your attention, diverts you where to look. Same techniques that we use in games. And set dressing, trying to get all that little detail that tells stories. It's an incredible job the Imagineers do to give that sense of immersion. And even using game techniques like dead ends, can't go there. Lighting and matte paintings again, just cover. That's cover right there. It's a pretty good example of stacked crates. And the alien section in that ride is all about foreboding and mimics the pacing of the film. You can see here also another alien part of the ride. And, it's all about giving that sense of a lived-in, real world that the Imagineers created. And again, I'm going to say this a lot, but we try to do the same exact thing, try to get that feeling that it's an actual space being used and it's functional. And even here in the Haunted Mansion, it's kind of dark, you can't see, but it's a very simple technique where it's just an empty hallway, but you have this floating chandelier, and it just sends chills down my spine. I seriously, every time I go on this part of the ride, I get those goosebumps. And it's no story, no characters, all environment storytelling. And the exciting rides also incorporate storytelling through Big Thunder Mountain here. And Living with the Land at Epcot, same kind of thing. This is all one slow-moving ride, but it has all these different areas of just storytelling. And even waiting in line. So some of the things I like about the rides are just the lines itself. In this situation, it's the Expedition Everest in Animal Kingdom Orlando. And it feels like you're on a journey. You start off in a gift shop, and then you start building up into you're getting your gear ready. So even the line is telling a story, which is what, again, we try to do that all the time. It's all about pacing. It builds the narrative that you're about to go on this journey. And all these little details add up to the final ride. Again, it feels very lived in, functional. The set dressing it feels like someone could just go there and walk in. And when you're making an environment for games, it's really important to have that same feel, like someone just left their coffee cup there, that they could come back instantly if they need to. Some more examples. And this is from the Tower of Terror, one of my favorite rides. They closed it recently here, but it's still in Disney World if you want to go there. And even seeing the age on how things just like were left alone. And that reinforced the story of the ride, the big narrative of the ride, that something dramatic happened. And people just left suddenly. So they left all of their workstations, just picked up and disappeared. And there's a hidden Mickey, by the way, there. It's always fun to try to find. So this again, it reinforces that the narrative of the ride, that something horrible happened, and everyone had to leave very quickly. They even left their wine glasses and their playing cards. Adds so much intrigue. And even the Imagineers had a little fun being goofy there. Yeah. Make stories everywhere. And then finding stories through reference. Josh mentioned about photography and capturing as much. My camera is glued to my hip most of the time. My girlfriend's here. We went to Japan recently, and I took 500 pictures of wires, I think. Yeah, I couldn't stop. And in this situation, I visited this ghost town in Nevada with my parents, and it was just riddled with storytelling. Everywhere, little corners, like this was kind of arranged, I think. I don't think this was actually left alone. But again, it makes you question what's going on, what happened here, what are the elements that make that feel intriguing. And even the cars here, it's riddled. Like, was this left alone, or was it in a firefight? Because it kind of feels like it's been maybe hit with some bullets. And thinking about, like Josh mentioned, the material, about how the age impacts that. And it's super important to think about all those details. And this is a picture I took in Singapore. And even in this picture, there's a lot of stories everywhere. Like, look at the AC unit over there. Like, that has been there for a while, and it's probably leaking and dripping and causing the bricks to wear away, or the plaster to wear away, revealing the bricks. It just adds a lot of intrigue and detail, and it feels authentic when you think about all these little stories in a space. And then even thinking how people live, like how they dry their clothes, how they just go about their day, including moments like that are very important. And even this laundromat in San Francisco, like a left item just tells a story, like they had to go, maybe they had to run quickly. When you think about all those little details, it just adds the authenticity of the overall story you're trying to tell. And like this broken tape, wet footprints, it maybe hints at a chase, but it could have just been left alone. But all those elements add to a story. And abandoned old environments are awesome for storytelling. They just, every corner just reeks of what happened. You know, what was it a family that left this very quickly? Did they have to get out quickly? And nature taking over spaces in this case is just absolutely beautiful. But again, it asks the question, asks the viewer, what's going on? So then, story through materials. I'm just going to talk. Josh did an awesome job talking about materials. But this is my point of view for some of the material stuff, and that's the scratches, the worn paint, the dust, the history. In this situation, just gives more authenticity to space. And the layers again, yeah. Thinking about if it was a new thing, this is very obvious, but thinking about all of those layers of history being used tells a story in the materials. And this is aboard the USS Hornet. It was a retired World War II aircraft in Alameda. And it was absolutely riddled with stories. Like every corner, you could tell that it was in service for like 60 years. So the amount of paint, they put on, whether it was all the layers going on, it just adds so much. And they had a lot of aircraft there too. So how the metal is scorched and burned, it really defines how much it was used. Another closer example reveals like what the flame does to that material, how it oxidizes and just creates a very interesting material. But if it was a fresh paint, a fresh new, it would not be like that. It just shows how long it's been used. And I went to school in Savannah, Georgia, and it's one of the best towns for ghost stories. And it was spared during the Civil War when General Sherman came through. So there's a lot of history there, and it's also by the coast. So you get all this erosion happening, this coastal erosion happening to the materials and the surfaces. And it shows the layers that the building went through. There was once brick, and then it was plastered over. It just really gives a lot of history. And then this makeshift makeshift, sloppy, fixed job here tells you about the people living in there, right? Like, were they really caring about the exterior? No, they just wanted to get the job done. And even a simple door, like how this was it kicked in by cops? Was it kicked in by workers being in a rush? Thinking about even a simple door can give so many opportunities for storytelling. And this is an Alcatraz, so in this material, those were grenades that went off during a riot. And thinking about, if something just drops on a surface, it would have a different effect in this. So by thinking about all these explosion patterns and how these work, you can you can give a story about what happened. Did inmates die here, for say? And they did. It was kind of sad. Okay, so going on to the professional aspect, talking about Star Wars stuff. So this is a 3D concept I did back for The Force Unleashed 2. And what's going on here, it's all environment storytelling. This giant drill robot ripped through the ship, and it gave you a path where to go. So that act, you didn't see the act happen, but the after effects of it happening allowed the player to go through. So I was lucky enough to work on the actual level for this too, but normally what I did is I do like 3D concepts early on to kind of get the feeling of what's going on. So it's like a concept, but I was able to take those and bring them into game relatively quickly. And this is the same thing for a cinematic environment. And it's amazing just how lighting and fog and a few shifts of that can make the story much more dramatic. Like, that's functional. That is, something's going down. And that's just through lighting and atmosphere. And then in this situation for the portal on 1313, which I modeled and textured, this one is about thinking about the layers of industry being used. Like, I had to think about like the living quarters, hangars, cargo ships, what's a factory level. Having all of those levels, their purpose gives the story of what this is much more weight. A few more shots of that. And crates, the backbone of environment art, crates and barrels. But even like the style of crate being used. So this is more of a military style crate, so it hints that this is maybe a military kind of ship. Those little details add to the big narrative. And just a few more, like this was another military area modeled. And even thinking about just the details in the modeling, so when you bake it down, that you have those, like where they hook their equipment onto so they don't fall out when the spaceship kind of rolls around. Thinking about those are really, really important. That's the final textured version of that. And some more slides from 1313. These were concept paint-overs done. But again, trying to get little nuggets of story. And in this case, this poor R2 unit became a trash can. But again, that's environment storytelling right there. It just gives an intended purpose of something, and then twisting it makes the viewer question what's going on. And when you're engaging the viewer like that, or the player, it adds so much depth to the experience. And then cities, thinking about like the layers of, again, like the portal, like the big circular thing, thinking about the districts, like a financial district, an entertainment district. All of those districts break up and make the space feel much more real. And then here's going to Uncharted 4, Scotland. Amelia Schatz was a designer. Melissa Altabello, which is a Gnomon graduate, she's awesome, was a texture artist on this. Scott Greenway was a lighter, and Mike Dudley was on effects. And in this situation, in the story of Uncharted 4, we just came back from the auction, and it was hectic, chaotic, it was a gunfight. And Bruce and Neil, they wanted this environment to feel like it was a time for you to bond with your brother, and they really wanted to keep a very simple, clean, peaceful, very, very just, not dramatic, not crazy, but calming. And by having these rolling hills and the more round rocks, it complemented later in the level when you were fighting again. And everything was very kind of sharp and rigid, and the basalt rocks used at the end complemented the environment in this. And then thinking about how rocks fall, how they erode, how they build up to the bottom, all these details are storytelling. It's like, what happened to these rocks? How did they get there? How did they erode? Yep. And now, actually, how the snow builds up, and that creates a nice kind of readable area for spaces, especially for this level, which was tricky to make readable at times because it was again, it was supposed to be dense and very filled with foliage, but using a simple palette allowed that to happen. And then having iconic landmarks in a level allows you to always have an area of orientation, and it is story, and it gives you a functional aspect of where to go. And thinking about how the grass grows on rocks, thinking about how the ivy falls over some of these details, it hints at the age and how long things have been there. Another example of more natural flowing foliage on that. And then in this puzzle area in Scotland, it was thinking about, like, this is all environmental storytelling about how this cathedral, part of the cathedral fell in a landslide, and you had to go up. And it was a tricky thing to get looking right and get playing right, but it was very fun to try to think about how things fell and how they, how the land pulled structures away and also still be readable. And then this is from worked with Rogelio on this one. This is from the island in Uncharted 4, and thinking about, again, this foliage not to a forest idea, but to a jungle idea, which is much more dense, much more crawling and creeping. So thinking about how things like fit in the various nooks and crannies of the rock structures. And then decay and time are big things that tell story. Like in this situation, I had initially a very simple kind of eroded building. It didn't have any kind of pizzazz, but concept artists came through and helped out. I think it was Aaron Lemonick came through and did a quick paint over, and it was exaggerated and it felt a little cartoony, but what it hinted at was that maybe something exploded inside there. And thinking about those kind of things make it feel a little more, just adds another layer of storytelling. And then so many people worked on this one. This was Alice Junquera, Rogelio, Brad Smith, and Joshua Pychak. This was a big team effort, a lot of people. A lot of work. And what it tried to do here is like this very decadent feel of Avery's house, but that nature took over, and he had these big ambitions in the game, in the story, right? He wanted to make this pirate colony, and that contrast of the nature reclaiming that and defeating him is complemented here in the environment. And again, the holes for foliage, anytime you can have an eroded area or building, have areas that light can go through, and areas that have foliage to creep and crawl, it makes it look cool, and again, it shows the history of how long things have been there. And now going on to some personal environment art with storytelling. So this is one I did in college. It was one of the projects we had, and I wanted to hint that maybe something busted through this gate, or maybe some rogue scientist stole stuff, and it was all about kind of like a nuclear facility. That's Los Alamos in New Mexico. And here's another one. I really like the dichotomy of nature versus man, or nature versus technology in this case. And the battle, the constant struggle between nature and science, and just how they kind of mix. It allows a lot of storytelling. In this case, it was maybe nature's reclaiming something that was left. Like this is also ties in the last image. Maybe it was a nuclear device. And then also you can have stories in small spaces. Like I took a photo of the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco, and I thought it was an interesting photo, but what if, sometimes you don't look at something first glance, but you look deeper and there's something going on that you just weren't aware of. In this case, I added this CG bug with a little city on it, just hinting that maybe there are stories in the details, in small spaces that you don't realize. And then here, it's a little weird concept I did of lawn gnomes versus pink flamingos. And it's all an environment. I'm not showing any characters aside from the decapitated flamingos, but it's hinting at something happened here. It is storytelling. And and this the next image I'm going to show. It's the same kind of thing. I painted this it was actually referenced from that battleship, and I played with the lens here to make it feel like you were peeking into something you weren't supposed to. So using lenses and using those techniques also enhance the story you're trying to tell. And I'm starting thinking about, again, more of that nature versus man technology idea. That you want to. I try to enhance and showcase the best I can. And here's another about offering the viewer intrigue. Like I wanted to hint that maybe giving the story elements that a sci-fi cowboy was setting up a futuristic camp, so I didn't want the camp to be typical fire. I kind of wanted it to be this glowing orb. And speaking of orbs, I like to make render balls. So these are studies that I do at home on the weekends for fun. I don't do textures at work and material work at work, so I do them at home just to be excited about it. I do love doing them. And in this situation, I'm capturing them with photogrammetry. And I think, using Substance is fantastic. You're creating the stories, but with photogrammetry, you're capturing stories that are already there and repurposing them in different ways. So there's the displacement of that. And even in my presentation of these, I'm trying to tell little stories, right? Like this is like an Earth gumball kind of feel going on. But again, it's more of just a composition of all the materials that are scanned. These are not, so a lot of these were using the bitmap to material also before I did photogrammetry.
Sorry.
Oh, no, okay. And here's another example of a displaced rock. And I recently watched True Detective, which is a great show, and I try to get that story into a ball. And that was my attempt at that. They had these little weird figures they had in the show. And I'm just going to do a quick little breakdown of this render ball, this mech ball. It doesn't make any sense. It's not supposed to be anything particular, but this is kind of the breakdown of what my process was thinking about the materials. So the raw materials is a very base standard steel. And I'm just going to show the shader here real quick. Very simple inputs, I think just 2 maps, a bump map and a reflection map. Everything else is handled in the shader itself with just values. And then I add the color on top, and that's just the acrylic paint layer. And that's the shader there. It's kind of hard to see, it's small. But then the color map, the reflection gloss that breaks up the surface, and the reflection map that says how much to reflect, and then a normal detail on top of that. And thinking about how these materials, how they build up, is super important. And in this case, I used Mari, which I would not use today. I'd use Substance Painter for this stuff. But I painted all these little scratchwares by hand, and it just reveals all those layers, right? There's 3 layers going on. And thinking about how each of those are made is storytelling. And there's the final one with a little bit of dirt oil and a little post-production on top of that. And then going into photography, I really love photography, like I mentioned, but I also love making these photo illustrations. And in these situations, I'm just trying to tell a story. In this one, it was about a kid trying to run through his imagination and carrying an idea through to completion. So that's the story I was trying to tell. People can get their own ideas from this. But in this case, I made it like a miniature, almost like a stop motion set. And that allowed me to really kind of play real time with all these little bits that I'm trying to tell in the story. A few more examples of that. And then going to photogrammetry again, is observing all of these detailed stories that nature provides. Like how these this is from Japan, how these roots grow over top of each other, how they interact. There's just a lot of story that's already ready to be captured. Look at this gnarly tree here, just what happened to that? How did it grow like that? But it's beautiful. And here's an example of just capturing a part of that in using reality capture, which is a photogrammetry-based software. And it allows you to capture these stories. So, and this was all done with an iPhone and reality capture software. So it didn't take much time at all to get that, and this could be ported into a game relatively, well, not super quick, but relatively quick. Here's just a little technical breakdown of that scene in action. And then the final one with in 3C Max. And that was an image. This is for a game asset now, capturing those stories in nature. It's a little rock pile I found in Nevada, and being able to place these all by hand is admirable, but you could also use procedural techniques to do this. But since it was already there, and then these stories of how these rocks settled and how they nestled in, I captured it and brought it into, this is Marmoset for baking, but then eventually got it into Unreal. And here's a little close-up on some tileable materials captured the same way. try to get all those little micro facets, those little glimpses and glimmers of things that break up the surface that add a lot more depth and variety to a material. So then going looking at another personal project, I was inspired by The Goonies and Stranger Things. Everyone seen Stranger Things? Awesome show, love it. And I was actually came up with this idea before I saw Stranger Things, but then as I was watching, it kind of gave me more fuel to think about what was going on. And I really wanted to ask the viewer, what's going on here? What happened? Hinting that a child maybe wandered into a cave and a crazy, fantastical event occurred was kind of like the base inspiration for this. And thinking about how the teddy bear, like this, I really wanted to stress test fiber and really small little details, like a fuzzy details. So by making the mud on the teddy bear, I kind of wanted to hint that maybe it was like Pan's Labyrinth, like the boy or girl went through this cave and was on a journey and then got pulled into something that was beyond normal. And a little detail shot of the shoe captured with photogrammetry. In this case, I wanted to hint, did the root grab the child, or the missing shoe kind of hints that something devious and sudden happened. So just leaving a few of those little key elements around makes the viewer fill in and ask, what is the story? And there's the clay mesh render of this one. And all that was made with this kit right here of assets. Another little close-up of the teddy bear with the mud visible. The shoe, which I got the shoe at Target and then painted it up using makeup and using dirt. And I was trying to tell the story of what happened here. Like it was slid in, did he fall in? So I kind of art directed the shoe in real life, like real life texturing. It's kind of fun. But again, using the photogrammetry to capture that. And then the displays details here, a little close-up shot of some of the rocks. That was actually not using photogrammetry, that was using bitmap to material on a picture I took of some rocks. So it did a great job of pulling out a lot of the displacement detail that I wasn't expecting. It was kind of a surprise. And there it is. Here I'm finding the composition, I'm testing out lighting and material. And my philosophy is if it works with a ball, it'll work with anything, for the most part. And in this case, I was just feeling out how the materials were reflecting, how the light was working. There's a view of it in 3CO Max. And then here's a 360 pano, which I love. It's almost like a game environment. It brings us a layer of depth to a space that is not just a still frame. So I think for me, if I'm doing more still images, I'm always going to try to include a pano render of that allows the viewer to see and view the space and find other stories. Like I wanted to, like in this situation, there's a little story going on behind there, kind of hints of what caused this thing, and I reused that True Detective ball, which I already had, so it was, but again, it adds that story. It adds another layer of what's going on that you couldn't do with a static frame. So yeah, so I mentioned every piece I try to do now, I'm going to try to do a pano. And here's using the photogrammetry assets that I captured. This is a Unreal scene of it all together. Again, I'm trying to tell stories. For some reason, I like to have the balls in caves. It's a weird thing, but I did it again here. And it's just showcasing that something was left there. What happened? It offers intrigue. And anytime you can do that, it's great. And just going to close this all up, thinking that it's all about design. I don't consider myself a designer, but it really is trying to solve a series of problems and that complement the story you're trying to tell. So in essence, I'm more of a problem solver, try to be, than anything. So that's it. Thanks, guys. So I think we're going to take a break now. That's my understanding.
Yes, we actually have about 15 minutes. If anyone has any questions for these guys, we can do some questions. You up for that?
Yeah. Go for it now. Yeah.
Do you want to raise your hand? Yeah.
I had a question about the Avery house. It got me thinking when I saw all the ruins and destruction. How much of the original form of that house would you design before you showed the wear and tear? Like a building exploded, for instance. Do you know exactly what that building looked like before it exploded?
Sometimes. In that situation, Rogelio actually did a modeling pass, first on like the big shapes, but before that even, there was a pass done by the designer that is a very block mesh gray box, and that kind of defines and sets the pace for what everything's going to be. So things are planned for, but they're not entirely figured out in the beginning. If that makes sense.
It does, thank you.
Cool.
Thank you. And the next one, did I see it? Wow, we have like 140 people here. No one
I think
has
there's one over there.
questions. Okay, sorry, I'm blank.
Hi, I have a tools question. I'm wondering, like, if I want to get into games, would it be beneficial to learn Mari, or is Substance really kind of taking over? Thanks.
I'll let you talk about, I think Substance is taking over.
Can you guys hear me still, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I might be a little bit biased here, but I think, I think Painter kicks ass.
Awesome.
It's faster for you to see results, and I think it would be beneficial. I always like to say learn both, make your own decision, and if you believe in a tool or a workflow, I mean, that's important. But I think, Substance is kind of, that's where everything's going. Studios are developing their whole pipeline and material libraries based on that, so I think kind of going into a job, knowing Painter and how that can all kind of tie in, it would help a lot.
And even Designer now has photo scanning tools built in.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yep.
so if you do the photo scanning stuff, you could use Substance. So I think Substance is
Yeah.
definitely like a necessity at this point.
Yep.
There's another question here.
Hello, I currently am a high school student, class of 2017. What tools would you recommend for us to start learning if we want to get into the whole design aspect of game design?
Probably Maya or like Modo, any kind of a 3D tool. They're kind of all the same, but Maya is definitely, I think there's a personal learning edition out that you can just download for free, and I think that's an essential one. You have any?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think anything, Substance Designer, Substance Painter, but as much as that's important, to me or to a lot of people, I mean, Photoshop is something that you should know. It's not something that you should just be like, hey, Substance is here, I'm not going to learn Photoshop. There's a lot that Photoshop can still do for you. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I do or did for Infinite Warfare, like I used Photoshop for. I made, strip textures and stuff like that in Photoshop and Quixel, and then brought it into Substance just because I wanted to keep things consistent, but I would not forego Photoshop, I would not forego ZBrush. Like Brian said, I think modeling packages are all really similar. You got modeling is modeling, right? Edge loops are edge loops, and extrusions are extrusions, and yeah, I think that's about it. And Unreal, CryEngine, whatever you feel comfortable with that's going to allow you to make art. Don't just feel like I have to use Modo because somebody said Modo is good or the best. Whatever makes you feel like you can make good art. I mean, you're the one spending time doing it, right? So use the tools that you enjoy and have fun with it. I mean, we're making cool stuff, so have fun. Try to anyway.
Yeah, no, totally. But also the foundations too, right?
Yeah.
Thinking about like just drawing, sculpting.
Yeah.
I think those are super, super
Yeah.
important to, you don't need the tools initially up front, but if you have the ability, even in the foundations, you can carry that through whatever tool you pick up.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think, like learning about design and composition. I mean, even for me, I think about design and composition even within a texture. Like, how does this flow? Like, how much, here's the busy area, here's the eye rest, and now does that feel good, right? If you have like a gravel road, you don't have rocks placed like you're playing Battleship, it's like dot, 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 dot. There's a flow, like you want to make it feel like water went through here or wind. So I think, yeah, that's just to kind of add to what Brian said, foundational things like if you're making hard surface stuff and you have a panel notch, if I draw a triangle on the edge, I'm indicating that something's happening here, but that's the focus of detail, and then you let the panel kind of breathe, right? So I hope that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We actually have a high school summer camp that we do here at Gnomon. in June if you want to find out about that.
that's
It's a
cool.
one-week
They have
camp
a-
for high school
it's,
students, so you get
for high
to
school
learn
students.
more about the industry and stuff like that. But let me know if you want to know more. Okay.
With the use of photogrammetry in your personal work, do you see that becoming the industry standard in the near future?
Industry standard, no. I think it's another tool. It is picking up, like Battlefront and the new Battlefield games are definitely using that. But in the end of the day, I think it's just another tool. I don't think it's a standard. I think learning learning as much as possible really is where it's at. But yes, I think it's going to get more predominant, but not a standard. And also stylized games, they really can't, I'm actually doing some personal projects right now where I'm making little things and scanning it like paper sculptures. And you can make stylized stuff, but I think true stylized games can't leverage photogrammetry. So again, it's another tool. I wouldn't say it's a standard though.
In a highly destructive environments like you guys were showing, what's kind of your tips on like tiling some of the textures?
I'll go for it, dude.
Can you repeat the question again?
In all these highly destructive environments that you guys have been showing, what's kind of your tips on tiling the textures?
So I think, now with more modern games having advanced shaders, I think kind of having I kind of showed it with the asphalt a bit, but if you have, your, we'll call it the simple IRES texture, and then you have your busy damaged one, you are going to be able to blend things together and it's going to look more believable. So if you have, like you paint a mask and you're like, oh, hey, I have, my painted metal, and then on the edges of my metal surface, it's wearing away because that's how stuff works. I think that's kind of where you want to think about it. You don't want to, I guess what I'm trying to say is with blended textures now and everything going on, you don't want to just put everything into one texture because then you can't do a lot with it, right? And then if you blend two things together, it's just going to feel better. It's going to be like, oh, that's cool, it's changing for me. And then that's going to help storytelling too.
Probably keeping the same level of detail everywhere too. So the
Yeah.
texel density, making sure it's all the same.
Yeah, that's a great
It's probably
point.
really important.
Yeah.
What are the main constraints that kind of hold you back? Is it polygon count or texture memory?
Everything. Everything. I think, yeah, I mean, it's there are limits. I think limits are good, but they are going away slowly after every generation of console. Eventually, I hope it's going to be like film where you can just throw whatever you want at it and it'll look great. But yeah, limitations right now, yeah, it's that. It's actually right now, it's light shadows, like having many objects that cast shadows accurately. That's a big thing that I would like to have everything cast shadows perfectly, especially foliage, but we can't do that. We need to, optimize that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think specifically from like a texture standpoint, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to work with really talented tech people that have, been able to pull things off, but I know that, limitations of I showed you guys, let's take for example the brick, right? The brick, it felt good with just the height and the normal, but if I didn't have any kind of AO, I'm losing a huge amount of detail and perceptual depth there, right? Of things that, I kind of mentioned your life experiences, right? You just mentioned shadow, so I know hey, if there's a shadow there, that's deep. If I take that AO map out, I don't know how that feels, how deep is that actually? So I think those are the kind of things that I'm attuned to, I guess. That's a really specific thing to textures, but having more robust shaders is always great, but sometimes you just can't. And I think, specifically with AO, if you absolutely don't have an AO map, for example, you could bake in dirt or dust, and that's a viable way to say, hey, I'm lacking the depth here from the shader, but hey, I could put dust in here, and so I'm at least doing something to make it feel like there's depth in there. I hope that answers the question.
Hello, I was just wondering what program you used for your photogrammetry, how you processed it.
Sure, so for the shoe I use Agisoft, which is great, but I'm using Reality Capture right now, which is awesome. It's on Steam. It's expensive though. It's like $100 for 3 months, it's expensive. Here's my recommendation, actually. So you can start and stop the whole program if you want to. So what I do is I scan a ton of stuff, and then I just get it for 3 months, and then run it through, and then deactivate. And but it's a powerful software. I know they're changing some policies of what they're trying to do. I don't know the full details, but it's like a magic software. You feed it a bunch of images, and they're relatively clean, and it creates the model really, and texture really, really nice. Obviously, you want to capture when it's overcast, if it's a 3D asset, use it in game, but yeah, the reality capture, it's awesome.
And my second question was, for your Unreal scene, how did you use low poly models with normal maps, or was that all like really high res?
No, it's all big. I should have shown the wireframe, but it's definitely higher than current gen. Like a rock was like 20,000 triangles, like one of the big rock files. But it was all baked down using Marmoset.
Okay, thank you.
And there's one more here.
Hey, I know more about the film process, but the game process, I'm kind of like 3 years behind. So do you still pack, how many UV sets do you use, and do you still pack everything in one? Because sometimes the texel density goes for a toss because you have everything in one UV set. Kind of.
So it's about UV sets, packing textures? Is that what
yeah,
it was?
yeah, for materials, separate materials and stuff.
You guys pack?
It depends on the engine and the pipeline. Yeah, I think it just does. I mean, I don't know what to say other than that. For me, like, so, you know, like when we were working on, or like when I work in Unreal, you have to have a second UV set. But I've also worked in other projects where you just don't, and then we depend on a lot of real-time, like lighting and post to add shader, or sorry, not shader, shadow, stuff like that. So I guess it really just depends on the pipeline. I don't know. If you have anything else? I mean, what do you guys do?
Well, Rogelio will talk more about that if you ask him a further question on that. But at least in like the older games, yeah, we would pack them by hand, like putting spec, reflection, and AO into a map. But we do that by hand in Photoshop.
Oh.
Yeah, for at least packing textures.
Yeah.
I think our engine does it automatically.
Sorry, I thought the question was specific to UVs.
I think it was a little bit of both, right?
Yeah. So as far as textures, yeah, we definitely pack. Yeah, you want to just work
Saves
with your
memory.
yeah, saves memory. Work with your tech art team to just try to do it the best way you can. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't understand initially. Yeah.
And then I guess in a similar vein, for geometry that you intend to instance or use a lot, and repetitive, so like if you have a bunch of walls that are based off the same asset, do y'all prefer to make multiple versions of a wall in different states? Or do y'all try to strive to do a lot of that with just textures? And whether it's blended with vertex values or painted maps or that sort of thing, or an engine tool that allows you to edit things.
I think using the engine tools as much as possible, but having a core set of a variety of assets is also really good. Like having a destroyed wall, having a clean wall, but then using materials and procedural effects in engine to vary that, like world space varying, is super powerful. I know we do that a lot with materials. Like you get different tinted crates just moving in a world space, and it gives that variation. But having, like, if the form is dramatically different, like you have one crate that has a different, more rugged style versus a, metal crate, obviously you're gonna have to make those variations and model them out.
Yeah. So, just for example, on Infinite Warfare, a lot of it's Radiant, right? The engine that we were using. So that's a brush-based editor. So a lot of the flexibility with the engine was, hey, like I have a wall, I'm gonna pop off that polygon face, and then I'm gonna convert it to another texture, and that's my drips, right? And so with that, I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you built everything in engine, there's a lot of flexibility there as far as like layering a detail, like vertex blending and all that. But as soon as you bring in a model, at the time, it was a little bit more restrictive. So kind of like what you said, it's just knowing the engine. Every pipeline's different, but there's always ways to squeeze things out. So, and there's people that are trying to figure it out, so they'll tell you. So it'll work out, yeah.
And in Audio, we don't use Unreal. We have our own custom situation, and it's Maya is basically our level editor. And the cool part of what we can do is we can take something that's an instance, make it T-Frag, it's called, so then we could customize that and add exactly what we need to. Since our games are so story-driven, having that ability is really awesome. And that's the benefit of having a modeling suite as your editor, is that you can do stuff like that. But Unreal can't. You can export it out and bring it back in, but it's really hard to do that.
I think to just add to that one more thing, like if I'm looking at a portfolio and I'm reviewing it for whatever, like just to give you advice, or if I'm looking at you for hiring, I'm going to not really be so worried about maybe how you got there, but I'm going to want to see that you did it. I'm going to want to see that you're thinking about it and that you care about it. And so, hey, if you made it in Unreal and you did a bunch of mesh instances and you vertex blended them, that's cool, you know, and maybe you go to a studio where you can't do that, but they do it in a different way, right? So I think I just want to see that you care about it and you have that attention to detail. That's good.
Awesome. Let's have a round of applause. Thank you, guys.
Good job, dude. Thanks.
Thanks, man. Thanks for letting me use your laptop.
Oh, dude, absolutely.